Of course the light changes as soon as I press record. I think we're just gonna have to deal with it. It's winter. If I don't record now, it'll be dark. So, hello friends. My name is Roisin and welcome, or welcomes back to Roisin's Reading. I'm sorry if that light's super distracting. I guess this is going to be a pretty mammoth vlog because this is the vlog where I'm reading the Goodreads Choice Award Historical Fiction Shortlist. There are 10 books on the shortlist, even though there are only 6 books here. 4 of them I couldn't get in physical copy. I did this last year and it was the longest vlog I had filmed to date. At that point, I think I have done some longer vlogs since, but I imagine this one's a mammoth vlog, so I should probably just get straight into it. Where's my phone? Where did I put my phone? Got all my info on it. Hang on. Right, left my phone by the kettle, didn't I? But I got it now. I'm going to do a little intro where I talk you through the books, and then I'm going to talk about some stats that I've noticed over my 2 years of reading historical fiction Goodreads Choice Awards. But I will timestamp everything, so if you want to skip over the stats and get straight into the reading, there will be chapters, so you can just jump away if you're not a stats nerd like me. Now, I don't use Goodreads, I use Storygraph, but Storygraph doesn't do awards like this at the end of the year, and Goodreads obviously has a much bigger user base, so there's a lot of people to choose from. Even though I don't use Goodreads, I do this I have been doing this for the 2 years I've been on BookTube, because I read a lot of historical fiction and I want to see what's popular, what people are enjoying in historical fiction, but it does tend not to be aligned with what my preference for historical fiction is. But I still think that this can be an interesting vlog to talk about, in general, the genre of historical fiction. Now this year, Goodreads Choice Awards were a little different. Normally there are 3 rounds. There's the first round with the voting and also write-ins that people can write in their favourite historical fiction of the year. Then there's the second round where those get collated and the top 5 write-ins get put with the top 15 and they get voted on. And then the final round is the top 10. And I read the top 10, or I have done these past 2 years. Now people always complained because the 5 write-ins, the voting from the first and second round were put together, so the 5 write-ins never got enough time. This year, they just got rid of the write-ins altogether. So there were 20 chosen by Goodreads and then straight into the second round. So Goodreads says that they choose books based on the fact that they are the most shelved with above a 3.5 rating in each genre. So I guess it still is a popularity contest, and of course the voting means that you can vote even if you haven't read all the books, so that most people who are voting, it's the book that has been most read that gets the most votes, rather than the book that the most people have enjoyed. Well, I guess the most people have enjoyed it, but the highest percentage of people who've read it have enjoyed is not the one that wins, or even the one that gets through to the second round. This year, the 20 longlisted books were, so it's a lot of books. So the ones that I had heard of before this were The Four Winds, Malibu Rising, The Dictionary of Lost Words, Great Circle, Small Pleasures, Of Women and Salt, The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, The Prophets, The Sweetness of Water, Crossroads, and The Love Song of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I think I probably would have been interested in reading all of them, and I had read myself Great Circle, Of Women and Salt, which is not a historical fiction novel, just by the way, and The Prophets. So I'd read 3 of them. Unfortunately for me, the 3 that I'd read did not make it into the final 10. The top 10 ended up being The Four Winds by Kristen Hannah, Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid, The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner, The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, The Paris Library by Janet Skeslein Charles, The Dictionary of Lost Words by Pip Williams, The Personal Librarian by Maria Benedict and Victoria Christopher Murray, The Hour of the Witch by Chris Bohjalian, The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles, Yellow Wife by Sadeqa Johnson. The other thing that I was interested in was, which time periods are we looking at? Which time periods are popular enough that they are getting this sort of recognition in terms of popular historical fiction? So if we look at the books that were longlisted, we have 2 books that are set during the Great Depression, 3 books that are set in the post-1960s 20th century, 2 books that are set in the early modern period, 5 books that are set during or immediately after the Second World War, 2 novels set before the Second World War but in the 20th century, 3 novels that are set either in the antebellum South or during the Civil War, so surrounding enslaved people and slave narratives. One novel that is not a historical fiction novel, it's set in 2014, and 2 novels that spans a long period of time as a generational novel. That shows to me that World War II is clearly our most popular genre for popular historical fiction, followed by more recent historical fiction and that antebellum slave narrative time period. The other thing that I noticed is that that the Goodreads Choice Awards historical fiction short long list leans very American heavy. 17 out of 20 of these books were written by US-based authors, by American authors. And then the other 3, we have The Rose Code and Small Pleasures, which are written by British authors, and The Dictionary of Lost Words, which is written by an Australian author, although it is set in the UK. A lot of these books are not set in America, but they are by US authors. Shortlist or Longlist, both of them, they're very American-centric, which I think is interesting, and probably why a lot of the books that I've read this year that are historical fiction are not on this list, because I haven't read a lot of American historical fiction. 3 of the ones that I have did end up on the long list, so maybe if I read more American historical fiction, I would have read more of the list before we started. And I recall this being true of last year. Now, I'm not going to go into a whole thing comparing this year's list and last year's list. I was tempted to, but I thought I would probably be the only person super interested in that. If you're not interested in the stats, you can come back now, because we're going to get into the vlog. And I will see you again reading. Hello! So I'm starting this reading vlog with Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So my history with Taylor Jenkins Reid is that I have read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo because my friend A was raving about it. They absolutely loved it and trying to get everyone to read it. And this was slightly before I saw it hyped everywhere else. So I read it and I thought it was kind of meh, a bit gossipy, kind of trashy, but that sounds really judgy. But it just didn't really work for me. I felt like there were a lot of plot conveniences and the writing wasn't my favourite. It was a bit gossip magazine style writing, and the whole framing device felt entirely unnecessary. The reason I'm starting with it is because I think it's going to be a really quick read because of that. So even though I didn't like 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I think it took me like a day to read it. So I think that I could read this quite quickly. I'm liking, but I feel like I remember liking Evelyn Hugo in the beginning as well, and then it just got tiresome. It's a very compulsive read in the same way, but the characters are all kind of overblown a little bit dramatic, and all of the in-depth descriptions of everybody's physical appearance is something that I've realised I'm not used to reading in fiction anymore, and it feels, I don't love it. So yeah, I'm not sure how to get on with that, but everyone's like constantly being described and everyone in it's hot, just everyone's hot. I think I remember that with Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo as well. Why does everyone have to be hot all the time? Some people do just look normal. But yeah, I don't know, it's fine is about the best I can say for this. And hopefully it will be an enjoyable experience to read, and I'll get through it fairly quickly, like I said. So yeah, come back to you in a bit. So that's good. I am halfway through Malibu Rising now, and I've left the book upstairs and I'm not going to go and get it, sorry. But it's all right. I'm not loving it, but I'm also not hating it. It's a very easy read. The thing that I struggle with a bit is that I've talked about on this channel before how I hate when authors don't trust you, and I feel like Taylor Jenkins Reid doesn't trust you, so she feels like she has to give you more information than you could possibly need to work things out. Body language or gestures, or use their dialogue and the things they've actually said. She will state every single thing that they are thinking, and then put a nail on it on the end to like really hammer home her point. And I don't like that style of writing. I would like to be trusted as a reader to understand things, to work out the communication, rather than have everything really laid out for me. It's like my humour, I prefer it to be a bit more understated rather than really like nailed, and I think that she does nail things a bit too much. The setting is really visual, I can really see it, which is good. The characters feel a little underdeveloped, and the plot is really racing along, which I think is why it's so easy to read, because there is just something going at the whole time. It's very predictable what's going to happen, I think. I mean, I could be wrong, but what's happened so far has been very predictable, and every time something's happened I've been like, yes, I predicted that about 10 pages ago. So Like, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Maybe she wants you to work it out and feel a sort of dramatic irony that the characters don't work it out. It's like a nothingy beach read is how I would describe it. Like, easy to read, doesn't take too much brain power, doesn't really give you that much either. Maybe the end will really blow my mind. Who knows? My red light is flashing at me, so I'm trying to go a bit faster. So I've also finished Malibu Rising, and I would say that this is, again, fine for what it is, but what it really reminded me of most was a poorly acted film. Like, I think what I mean by that is that the dialogue in this is bad, but sometimes the like internal dialogue is also bad. A lot of the dialogue in here was the sort of thing that you only expect from a soap opera or a Nicholas Sparks film, kind of really overly earnest and sincere, and not showing us things, making people say things that people would never say and just seem a bit ridiculous. And the same with their internal monologue. Everything was just so earnest. It really annoyed me, and I thought that the ending was neat, overly neat. Everything just wrapped up so perfectly, and I mean, if that's what you want in a book, if you want everything to be like a perfect little bow and very easy and you don't have to think about anything, then this would be a book for you. But I would say that out of the two that I've read so far, this would be my least favourite, and the Rose Code would be better, and I think that's because the Rose Code was more enjoyable. For this, I was literally rolling my eyes at some points. I was like, oh my god, what? No one would say that. And it just really felt inauthentic, and there were points where I could feel like Jenkins Reid was like, oh yeah, that's a killer line, I've really nailed it, and I'm like, It sounds like fan fiction. It sounds like it reads a little like it was written by a very accomplished 17-year-old. So yeah, it's not my favourite. Not the worst either. Like, again, for what it is, it does what it wants to do. Like, for this cover, for this beach read kind of vibe, for this not taxing and easy to get through kind of book, fine. But I found this a little more cliche, a little more irritating to read. I started listening to the audiobook of The Rose Code, and this was one of the ones that I was a little less thrilled was on the list, because as I've spoken about a lot on this channel, World War II fiction, not entirely my jam. At least this World War II fiction is Bletchley Park, World War II, rather than Holocaust fiction, which is the kind of fiction that I really struggle with a lot of the time. I am enjoying it more than I thought I would. It's kind of a cozy Sunday afternoon film kind of a book, which is sometimes what you want. The audiobook is narrated very well. I have to get over my personal dislike of Prince Philip, but luckily he's not a huge character in it. He's just sort of tangentially in it because one of the characters is based off of Prince Philip's first girlfriend. Kind of enjoying the characters, I'm enjoying the dialogue. This feels like kind of Mitford style in terms of the way the dialogue is, or one of the characters, but then it also has more working class people. Some of the descriptions of abuse, I don't know, just feels like melodrama, maybe, is the best way to describe it. I don't know, I'm enjoying it more than I thought I would, and I'm going to reserve judgment because I've only just begun it. I'm not that far into it yet. Hello! So, I am now halfway through The Rose Code, and I'm enjoying this book way more than I thought I would. I wonder if I was just being, hang on, move you back a little bit so my head doesn't look quite so much like a moon. I think I was probably being a bit of a snob, and also a bit reluctant considering how this vlog went last year, which I'll leave in the cards above. I'm enjoying it. Like, it's not my favourite book, but it is a lot of fun, and I think the characters are well developed, and I really enjoy reading about them. Some of the like darker aspects do feel a little soapy, maybe, but the rest of it's really nice. The dialogue is sparkly, I like the characters, it's predictable, I can kind of tell what's going to happen, and I can tell what's being kept from me on purpose. That sort of information, but that's sometimes what you want, isn't it? A nice predictable book. I am enjoying the setting. We kind of set up a mystery now. There's a mystery that was kind of set up at the beginning, but we're getting into the mystery more. I'm not liking as much as the like character stuff, but apart from that, yeah, I think that they are lovely characters, and I think this would make a great like Sunday afternoon film. Hello, I have to say I'm impressed with this camera because it's 3:30 in December in the south of England, which means it's real dark, and if I was still filming on my phone as I had been previously, you would not be able to see I had features, so I'm impressed. This means that the winter probably won't be quite so dire in terms of my filming. I finished The Rose Code. I'm too close to you, aren't I? Finished The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, and this was fun. This was fun and fine, and like, if you like a good like Sunday afternoon mystery with a bit too much melodrama in terms of the like hard issues that it deals with, everything being a little over the top, kind of a ridiculous plot, very much like if you like Downton Abbey, you will like this book. Like anyone vaguely radical becoming entirely drawn into the status quo of the British class system, you'll love it. But it was fun and it was enjoyable. Dialogue was was good. Everything kind of was accomplished enough. Like it was good for what it was. It was good at what it was doing. It isn't trying to be some sort of literary masterpiece. It isn't trying to say anything about anything. So it is very much the status quo. You know what's going to happen. You know who everyone is. Like the twist, there was all of the twists I guessed. There was one twist that I'd got slightly wrong, but basically right. And the rest of it, I was, yeah, the main thing. I got there. I knew what was going on. So it's not a taxing book. It's not a book that's really going to blow your mind, but for what it is, it's a good one. So if that's what you want, if you want something fun and comforting, I would recommend the audiobook as well. Good audiobook. The Rose Code just was my preference for a comfort read. Dialogue occasionally got a little annoying, but also managed to do the like bubbly, sparkling thing of the time period, like of those screwball comedies or Nancy Mitford. Like it was the style that it was taking from was more interesting to me than the style that this was taking from. So that's 2 books down, 8 to go. I'll see you later. I have begun the Personal Librarian, the ebook, which I don't really love ebooks, so I always feel bad for books that I read in ebook because I'm like, this could be bad for you. But so far, it is sickeningly sweet. Now, I normally wait until I'm like 50 or 75 or so pages into a book before I do this, and I'm only like 25 pages in. So far, it's just so earnest and so trying so hard, and I just, there doesn't seem to be an ease with the writing, and it seems to be very like moralistic as well, which I don't want that. I don't want my characters prejudged. So yeah, so far, but I am really, really early on. Hello, so I am now actually probably a good chunk of the way into the Personal Librarian. So the premise is interesting and the story could be good. And the story's not being told in any poor way in terms of the plot. It's moving along at a nice pace. It doesn't feel rushed, but it doesn't feel super slow either. The characters feel entirely undeveloped at all. Everyone feels like perfect and unreal. It feels like the writers are trying to use up as many of their impressive vocabulary words as they can in every sentence, and they are formulated in the most awkward way you could possibly write a sentence. And also it feels like they're trying to write as if it was 1905, but it's not got any ease to it. It feels very difficult. It feels like the writing was very put on, and which is particularly difficult because it's told from the first person perspective of a woman from 1905, and so it should feel like ingrained and natural in her voice, and it doesn't. It feels very forced, and like these people are trying to write the best that they can. Everything's very overblown, and yeah, like I said, they're just using lots of fancy words, and sometimes it feels like it's not quite the right word for that situation. Like it doesn't quite make sense. The style of the writing, both in the style of the writing and the development of the characters, I feel like it's just missing something. The characters don't feel like real people. I am halfway in the Personal Librarian by those 2 people. I'm so bad at remembering names. Fucking hell. It's really bad. It's really over the top in terms of the writing. Like I said before, it's the same thing. It's just like it's trying to use all... I really want a metaphor for that kind of thing. I know there's an American one where they call it like silver dollar words or something like that, but it's just really over the top, really awkwardly phrased. It's constantly like, oh yeah, I'm so witty and clever with my dialogue, and it's like, no, you're not. This is written like for what teenagers would think was like slam dunk dialogue, like when you have a conversation after the fact of an argument and you think of the thing that you should have said, it's like that level. It's like not actually that clever, but it seems better. And yeah, that's kind of frustrating. The dialogue's so bad, the characters are so one note, so one-dimensional, and there was so, and it is incredibly over the top with the kind of things that it's trying to put forward, and its main character is just absolutely perfect. She is so perfect in every single way, and it's really frustrating because that's not human. And I understand that she's like done this cool stuff, like she's a really impressive woman, but she doesn't have to be perfect in every single way and absolutely able to charm everyone every single time, and nothing ever goes wrong. Like there's a little bit, like there should be more tension because she's passing as white with a racist boss and in a racist society. There should be more tension, but there's not really any tension. Like nothing ever really goes wrong. It's probably my least favourite out of all the ones I've read so far. It's probably my least favourite. But what I do have is some packaging. Yes, I know it's from Amazon. This was the only way I could get these 2 books. So we've got The Yellow Wife by Sadeqa Johnson. This is about the plantation in Virginia and a woman who's been promised freedom. She's been promised to be set free at her 18th birthday, but instead she is forced into a different plantation in a terrible place. So there's that one, which someone said was their favourite of the ones they've read so far, so that's good because I was unsure about that one, but it's had a good recommendation. And then if I can ever work out where there it is. There we go. Oh, I have not bought 2 full price hardbacks a very long time. The Hour of the Witch by Bohjalian. So yeah, this is the one about Salem witch trials. Got lots of praise on the back, but none by anyone I've ever heard of. So oh yeah, and it's only got the US price and the Canadian price on it. It doesn't have a UK price on it, so I'm wondering if this one, like I couldn't really work it out, but I think this one might not have been released in the UK yet, and I'm unsure whether this one was released in the UK, which is why I had to buy them. I am 20% of the way through the Dictionary of Lost Words, and again, this one just feels alright to me so far. Characters feel pretty good, well developed, I would say. I think our main character, I can sort of understand her and see her, and there is good differentiation between different characters, which seems like such a basic thing to want in a book, but compared to some of the other books that I've read so far, it's doing a better job of that. The writing is not special, but it's not bad either. It's fine. Occasionally being a bit too on the nose, being a bit too explanatory of everything, which seems to be a problem that I find with commercial fiction, the reason that it doesn't work for me so much. Like, it's difficult because I'm reading it right alongside the personal librarian, and the ways that they are actually set at the same time period, and so the ease of the writing is so much better than that. The personal librarian seems to be writing what these values they want to be espoused, whereas the Dictionary of Lost Words is writing more like, can you hear those cats wailing outside? It's writing more like real people. It feels more real and lived in. But yeah, it's just okay. I haven't fallen in love with the writing or the characters or anything yet, and I'm not 100% sure why, so I'm struggling to critique it here, but I'll go back to you in a bit. I'm halfway through the Dictionary of Lost Words by someone, and I'm enjoying it. It's a fun kind of rompy book. The best way to describe it in terms of comparisons is if you've read something like Laura Purcell, I would say it's like that. Kind of like Stacey Hall's, but a bit better than Stacey Hall's because the period feels more real. But I think the problem that I'm having with it is that it's not super grounded in the period. Not that it feels like it's too modern, but that it feels like... So I like it. I think the story is interesting. I think that the characters are really good, really well fleshed out. It's a perfect sort of cozy read, if that's what you're into. It's not too heavy-handed with the like suffragettes, women's rights, women are forgotten stuff. A little bit, but not too heavy-handed with that, and that's enjoyable. I think the thing that I love in historical fiction is when the the writing is beautiful, and when the setting feels really viscerally real, like you can feel like you're immersed in that time period, which I get with Hilary Mantel, I got with Cathedral by Ben Hopkins, where the visuals are okay, not so much the visuals, because I feel like I can sort of see what's going on in this book. It just doesn't feel tangible. It feels like I'm watching a costume drama rather than I'm really in that time period, which is fine. I love a costume drama, but it's not the same. It's not my favourite because it's not reached that level of really immersiveness. So I like it, but I don't love it to the extent that I can do with historical fiction. I think this one's just fine. It has done one thing that I hate. Right, I'm gonna skip to this point if you want to avoid spoilers for this book, but she's had sex like twice and got pregnant, and I really, really hate it when that happens in books, because it just feels so predictable. Like, oh, she's having sex in the history times, she's definitely not using contraception, so she must be pregnant. Like, there was a lot of discussion of contraception in the Rose Code, which kind of was like, well, people aren't getting pregnant because contraception, which obviously is different for women in the 1940s to women in the early 20th century. But oh, she's having sex with him. And they're not talking about, they're not very clearly either describing the type of contraception they're using or the fact that they're not doing penetration. That means she'll get pregnant. Like, it so annoys me in books that is kind of, you can tell if they haven't told you about the contraception or told you that they're just doing oral or whatever, then you know that that character's going to get pregnant. And I find it frustrating, because it's not that easy to get pregnant, and obviously it is plausible that they get pregnant, but it just frustrates me that women always must be punished with unwanted pregnancy when they have sex in books. Yeah, so that's kind of annoying that that happened. You can come back now. So overall, still enjoying it, still quite fun, but not my favourite kind of historical fiction. I have also begun the Paris Library, which I have in physical copy somewhere. I might have taken it upstairs. And it's not my favourite, again. It's set between two time periods, one in the Second World War and one in the 1980s. It's fine. Again, I would probably say, I don't know how to describe how I feel. The characters, yeah, some development of character, not really any development of time period, very on the nose in terms of what it's trying to sell you. I can feel that there is going to be some Holocaust stuff coming up. I'm only 50 pages in. This is not a very good full review, but my camera is flashing red battery at me, so I'll tell you more when I'm halfway through. Okay, I don't normally do this, but I just want you to know how cheesy this Paris Library, that was really blown out, how cheesy this is. After the revolution, I was forced to say goodbye to my country, he said. It was painful to leave, but my brother and I believed that in coming here we'd be in a better, smarter place. Isn't France the country of the Enlightenment? In Russia, many people were killed in pogroms. Our neighbour was killed just for being a Jew. So when I hear talk like that, I'm sorry. And this is, I guess, hatred is everywhere. He took a drag on his cigarette. When he blew out the smoke, it seemed like a sigh, even in our library. It's really cheesy. Really, really cheesy. Hello. I realise the lighting is horrible, but we're just gonna have to deal. And I've just eaten chocolate. Wasn't a sensible time to start filming. So I finished the Paris Library, and I don't think I talked about it. That was a bad book, wasn't it? Yeah, that was a really bad book. So it is very predictable, very cheesy, wants to talk about serious issues but won't really commit and go into things. Really speedy, really really quick. It just keeps rushing through the whole plot. There's nothing that's explained, nothing that's got any room to breathe. Everything is just like bam, 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 bam. And none of the characters have any development to them. They're like side characters in a children's book kind of developed. Like, they have quirks, they're like really quirky, but they don't have any actual personalities, wants, desires. Everyone's emotions are really quick to turn around. Someone will say something and then someone will be like, I'm so angry with you, and then they'll say something else and they'll be like, oh, I completely understand your position now, I am no longer angry at all. There is no nuance whatsoever in the morality of the book. It's like it was written for children, except with sex scenes and Nazis, and boring. So boring. I could not get on board with any of it. Yeah, it's just, and the writing was so twee and annoying, and with the worst, most clunky similes. So yeah, I really didn't like that book, unfortunately. And the Paris Library was so clearly an American's romanticised view of Paris, and there was a lot of Americanisms in it that was kind of annoying, but she kept trying to use British words, and I was like, this person's French, and they work in an American library. Can you just not try and use British words because you're trying to be like, oh, they're European. This is European people speaking, so I'm going to, one, randomly insert French words in a way that makes absolutely no sense, and then two, use the word chinwag incorrectly over and over and over again. She kept saying, we were sat there in silence while Mama chinwagged. You can't chinwag by yourself. It's also not normally a verb, it's a noun. But I think that this person thought that chinwag meant like chattered, but it doesn't. And why did no editors get this? Because no editors were British. So they just were like, oh yeah, that word. So yeah, it drove me mad. Then I'm also halfway through The Lost Apothecary, and none of the books on this shortlist are particularly well written. Some of them are accomplished enough, some of them are terrible, and this is falling more towards the terrible side. Again, it is very clear that it is written by an American who is writing about Britain, and it's really annoying that nobody has checked this. Because, for example, she has a British man calling trainers sneakers. Never gonna happen. She also mentions a British child talking about dancing with fireflies in her garden. We don't have fireflies in the UK, we have glowworms and they don't fly, and they're very rare. So I've never seen a glowworm in my life. So it's just very, very clear that this has not been written by a British person, but it's set in Britain, and that's frustrating because it just suggests to me that she hasn't done enough research about Britain, which also suggests to me that she hasn't done enough research about the historical fiction time period, and it doesn't feel like we're in a historical fiction time period. Again, we're being beaten over the head with the morals of the book. There is nothing subtle about it, and there is nothing nuanced about it either. Yes, we are like from the perspective of a murderer. I don't know if, hopefully I've done an introduction where I've explained what everything is, because I'm just in ranting mode right now. And so I suppose maybe there's the nuance of us like thinking she's morally grey rather than just a terrible person, but everything's explained away, and the reason she's doing things is really, I don't know, the morality is so annoying. And again, serious issues, but not properly invested into. There is a word that I want that begins with like div, and I can't think of what it is. It's just so badly written. The characters they aren't developed at all. It feels like a bad rom-com in certain aspects to it. Like it's a chick lit. It's a chick lit book, but a bad one. About a woman who is a 30-something who has been with a man who has caused her to give up stuff, and now she's realising that she should have gone with her own heart all along. Like all of the stereotypes that you expect in a chick lit book, but poorly written. Like sometimes they can be funny and charming. This is not funny and has no charm. It is, I'm really sorry, I've just realised that people watching this might be fans of any of these books, and I'm just like ranting. Maybe I'm missing, it's just not for me. It's just not for me. If it's for you, that's fine, it's for you, but it's not for me. I am so upset. Why does every single woman in this book really desire babies, want babies, babies are their whole obsession? Every single one of them's like, my womb, it must be filled with babies. And I'm like, this was published in 2021? This is ridiculous. Yes, some women want babies. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with women wanting babies. Just why does every single woman's whole obsession is with having a baby? Okay, I'm done with ranting. I'm done. Hello. Oh, you're a bit close to me, aren't you? Ooh, there we go. So I have read the first 7-ish chapters of this. They're very short chapters. This is Yellow Wife. Sorry, I took the dust jacket off. But Yellow Wife, is that better? Is that not upside down? I don't know. Anyway, I was thinking about how some of these books I've listened to the audiobook of. I've listened to 3 audiobooks, I think. Some of these books I've read physically, and one of these books I read as an e-copy, and how the different mediums affect my rating at all, because I know some people say that they read audiobooks and they don't retain the information as well, or they prefer books they've read in physical copy, or vice versa, because you know how much I love an audiobook. But I have liked the writing of an audiobook I listened to in the Dictionary of Lost Words, and I have disliked the writing of an audiobook I listened to in The Lost Apothecary. I have liked the writing, or I've disliked the writing of a book I read physically with the Paris Library, and now I quite like the writing of a book I'm reading physically. So I don't think that the medium affects my opinion. So this one, yes, the writing is definitely stronger than most of the other ones that I have read so far, but it's still not perfect. Some of the dialogue is a little clunky, only occasionally, but it is. But for the most part, this writing feels a lot more accomplished, a lot smoother. I'm not noticing the writing, whereas in a lot of the books that I haven't liked, I've really noticed the writing and disliked it. And since I'm not noticing the writing, it's also not particularly beautiful, but it's doing a good job of setting up the place. Again, I still don't feel hugely ingrained in the time period, and I don't know what it is about excellent historical fiction that does that this isn't doing yet, but I certainly feel like the characters have already been very well established and developed for such a short period of time. There's been a lot of plot that's happened in like the first quarter of this book, which is not usually my preference, but I feel like we needed the setup and then to get into the terrible time that's going to happen later. Like, obviously it's about enslaved people, and so it's already terrible, but from the synopsis it's going to get worse, because they're going to one of the like worst plantations, according to the synopsis. Like, none of the plantations were good, but some were more bad than others in terms of, you know, torture and stuff. Anyway, so not looking forward to that in terms of pleasurable experience, but it can still be a good book when it's telling about these terrible experiences. Very short book though, so the plot is quite speedy, which is not my preference, but apart from that, yeah, so far I'm liking this better than most of the other books that I have read. I know someone commented on my channel, sorry I can't remember who it was, and said that this was the one they voted for because it was their favourite out of the ones they had read, and I can see why, after having read 6 of the others, that this one would be someone's favourite. So in my jammies, with wet hair, handheld camera. I was trying to get better at vlogging than this, but at least I'm resting you on my knee, so hopefully you won't be shaking around too much and my arm won't get so tired that I'll have to keep changing sides. I am now halfway through The Yellow Wife by Sadeqa Johnson, and I am I'm not loving this that much. Like, at the beginning, I don't know if I was just excited by the fact that it's better written than The Personal Librarian and The Paris Library. I've just realised that there were 3 books called The Book of Something last year, and this year there are 2 books that are libraries and 1 dictionary. So obviously the historical fiction side likes books about books. Not me, I don't like books about books. So anyway, I'm halfway through and I think I was enjoying the fact that the writing is better than that. The writing's still not the best. It's fine. Probably the second best out of all the ones that I've read so far and talked to you about in terms of the writing. There were a couple of clunky things, the occasional awkward word or word that feels out of time, but not too bad. Nothing as bad as the endless annoying similes in the Paris Library and the overwrought, overdramatic soap opera dialogue from The Personal Librarian. So it's better in that sense. The thing I am struggling with it is that it's so speedy. Like, this is a 270-page book. I'm halfway through. We are moving at such a clip through everything. I haven't had time to... I think the characters are well fleshed out, but I haven't had time to really experience anything or to feel the setting. There are, obviously, it's a book about slavery. There are really horrific things going on in this book. But they're in such fast sections, and I don't know if that's, like, intentional to make it not dwelling on, not, like, glorying in the misery of slavery, because I know that some of the trouble that people in general have about slave narratives. If you read Roxane Gay's essay about 12 Years a Slave, the film, not the book, I know the book was actually written by the guy that it's about, wasn't it, but the film, about this, like, sort of uncomfortable dwelling in the horrors of slavery, and this book is definitely not dwelling in them. It's not hiding from them either, but it is very speedy through them. But it's just so fast through everything, and again, I don't feel immersed in the time period at all. It doesn't feel very much of the time period. Like, obviously we can feel it's of the time period because of what's going on, because it's a, like, non-fantastical book about chattel slavery in America, so it's obviously the time period is period of slavery in America, but obviously the period of slavery in America was, what, 200 years, 250 years? And we're not really feeling which part of those 250 years this is specifically in. Like, there's a mention of Dickens, there's a mention of 1850, so I know what time period it is, but only because of being given the facts rather than because of feeling it's in that time period. And I would like to feel some more effort has been put into making it feel like it is the period of time that it's in. So yeah, so far all right, very fast paced. Not my favourite, not my least favourite. Oh, I finished The Yellow Wife. I don't think I told you that. I finished The Yellow Wife by Sadeqa Johnson. This one, again, obsessed with motherhood and being a mother. I feel like this one had an interesting story to tell and didn't give itself enough space to tell that story. Everything happened at a very fast clip, and I don't feel like the characters were complex or deep enough. There were some characters that I felt an affection for, July, for example, and the circumstances are of course horrible and horrendous, and lots of terrible things are happening because it's about slavery and the Devil's Half Acre, so one of the worst slave jails in the country, and you know, that's saying something when you're talking about slavery. But everything just sort of happened so quickly, and there was no space given, no time for a sense of foreboding to happen when things were happening, or no time for a sense of hope and wanting people to get somewhere, because you'd be like, oh, I hope they escape, I hope they escape, oh, they haven't escaped, and it would just be within one paragraph, and you'd be like, there's not enough time, you haven't given me enough space to build any emotions, and you haven't given me enough space to get to know these characters. So yeah, I'm glad this book was short for my sanity whilst doing this reading vlog, but I feel like to tell this story, this book needed more space. More time, and there needed to be more like description, not of the horrendous things that I kind of think that she did a good job of keeping them in a way that made you feel the horrendousness of them without it being gratuitous or voyeuristic in any way, which some narratives can go into. I think I already talked about that Roxane Gay essay. I think it had potential, I just think it didn't quite live up to it. So far I've read 7 of these books, haven't I? So what would I say? I think The Dictionary of Lost Words is still my number 1, followed by The Rose Code, Malibu Rising, then The Yellow Wife. I know that the Personal Librarian will be at the bottom and the Paris Library would be just above that. So what's the one that I'm forgetting that I've read? The fact that I've forgotten I read it probably doesn't speak too well to it, but I have been reading a lot. The Lost Apothecary, right, yeah, that's probably right. Lost Apothecary, Paris Library, Personal Librarian, but I didn't like any of those 3 at all. But I think that's the order that I would put them in. Good morning. I've apparently given up on looking somewhat presentable when I come on camera, whereas one of my plans was to not look like this, but it really does stop me reading if I have to look presentable every time I come on camera, because I have started The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. It's Towles, not Towles. Sorry, Mr. Towles. Yeah, it's a very simple story, very straightforward. It's written with some charm. It feels like another quite easy read. There's some tragedy, but it's not too serious, for example. And it feels, yeah, fairly readable. It feels kind of like YA, and I don't know if that's just because all of the characters are teenage boys, or like they're all like 18-year-old, 19-year-old boys. It's definitely a road trip story and a coming of age story, very much traditional, like American men story of road tripping and coming of age. There's a lot of like ideas about America and what America is being discussed, but not like in a very pro-America way so far, which I'm not against in any way. I mean, it's not very complex the way that it's discussing America, but this has all been from the perspective of these young male Nebraskan characters in the 1950s, so I do feel like it's like honest to the way that they would perceive things, and I don't know if it's going to be like complicated later on in the story because I'm only a third of the way through it so far. But yeah, it was written with some charm. It's definitely one of the better written of the ones that I've read so far. It's quite obvious what's being done. Everything that's being done is quite obvious. Like one of the characters is this sort of con man, young con man kind of character whose father was an actor who abandoned him, and he's like clearly got all this bravado to protect his emotions, and clearly can't write and can't swim, but he doesn't tell anyone that. And it's all, yeah, fairly straightforward and obvious, which is why I think, again, it feels more like YA. But it's not bad YA. Things that it's reminding me of, A Gathering Light, A Northern Light by Jennifer Donnelly. I mean, I preferred that, but I did read that when I was a teenager, and so I don't know how much of my preference of that is like nostalgia for being the right time to have read it, whereas I'm no longer maybe the right age to be reading this. My kettle's just boiled. But yeah, those are my initial thoughts in regards to The Lincoln Highway. I'm also a third of the way through The Hour of the Witch by Bohjalian. I'm unsure how I feel. Very speedy, very plotty. A lot of these books are very plotty, and I think that's because most people are readers who want a story, and that's why they become popular books, are books with a story involved. I feel a bit more involved in the time period than I have in some of the other books. However, the way of writing is confusing me a little bit, because like all of the description is done in a very sort of standard modern style, but some of the dialogue has the random thou and thys thrown in, but it doesn't feel, I don't know, it just feels a bit awkward. It is difficult to do, and I prefer books that sort of play with the syntax to make it feel old-fashioned without adding in those words, because they just feel cumbersome, I think, especially when like all of the dialogue, all of the description, all of the like prose that's not dialogue, even if it's coming from inside characters' heads, doesn't sound like that, but then when they talk it does, and not all the time either. It feels inconsistent. Seems to be a theme of these books about women being obsessed with becoming mothers and having babies. It's come up a few times. Everyone's obsessed with babies and motherhood. And again, it's not a trope I really enjoy, and people becoming pregnant off of one time. Again, not that hasn't happened in this book. She's been married for 4 years and she's not pregnant right at the start. But you know, there's just this real theme of pregnancy and women being obsessed with pregnancy and wanting babies, and it's kind of annoying me that that's the theme that's coming through. Like last year the theme was women with magical powers in historical time periods, even when nothing else was magical. This year the theme is all women must want babies. I'd rather they had magic powers, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, it's just fine so far. It's better written than some of the other ones that I read, but then I thought that about some of the other ones before I got further into them, so who knows. Hello, so I've started The Four Winds by Kristen Hannah, and again, I am not loving this book. The trope of a woman who gets pregnant the first time or the second time she has sex. I think this is the 4th book out of the top 10. I mean, that is all of them, but still 40% of these books have that trope. I don't like that trope. And it's another woman who really wanted a baby. Yeah, it's not been the best year so far. I feel like some of these, like this one, it seems like could be a good story, but the writing is terrible. There's no beauty to the writing. It's very straightforward. It's kind of on a Jojo Moyes, like the Giver of Stars that I read last year. Kind of on that level, which was not my favourite. Like the setting's interesting, and I think the story could be interesting if told in a different way. Oh, the thing that I was going to say was, like, in the middle of the first chapter it said, oh, she loved reading, she loved to read. Again, another theme. All of these books pretty much have been about storytelling and reading and history through writing things down. Those 3 themes have sort of come up again and again. But anyway, she loves to read, and it's her escape from her life where she's like the put upon daughter, and it's the thing that allows her to like imagine her life being different and be brave. And that was said in the middle of the first chapter, and then the second chapter began with exactly that sentiment, and I'm like, why are you telling me the exact same thing? It's like this book has not been edited, like no one noticed that the exact same thing has been said. Not literally the exact same words, but the exact same concept, sentiment has been expressed so close to each other. Like, what's the point of that? Hello. So this video has gone up a lot later, well, a week later than anticipated, and there are a couple of pretty good reasons why. I think they're pretty good reasons anyway. So the day this was supposed to go up, my laptop broke down. I'll put a picture here of what the screen looked like. The screen completely stopped working, so I had to go put it in a shop and get it fixed. But I also didn't feel great that day. I'd done some lateral flow tests though. My boyfriend's sister got diagnosed, had positive test result for COVID. So I'd been doing lateral flows every day and they were all negative. And then on Tuesday again, I did the lateral flow, still negative. I get to work, I don't feel great. I start having these chest pains, which I used to get all the time. I haven't had for a while. I've been to A&E a few times with them. There's nothing wrong with my heart. I have arthritis, I have inflammation. Basically, it's called costochondritis. And so it was that, and I was like, I haven't had this in a while. But I got sent home, and I just sort of felt rubbish. And my boyfriend then also got sent home from work,
feeling rubbish. So got home, he did a lateral flow and it was positive. Very, very faintly positive, but it was positive. I did a lateral flow and it was negative, but I still didn't feel great. We went and did a PCR the next day and yeah, I got COVID. I still have COVID. It's Friday, so I did the PCR 2 days ago. It feels like so much longer than that. So I have, let me have a look, in my NHS app. How many days do I have left? 7 days to go. Can you see that? 7 days to go on my self-isolation because I have COVID. And you can probably tell by looking at me because I look quite unwell, but you can also probably tell from the amount of energy that I have very mild COVID. Fortunately, possibly because I am double vaxxed and boosted, possibly also because this Omicron variant is possibly less strong for a lot of people, which doesn't mean I won't have long COVID, which I'm very worried about. But regardless, I'm pleased that I'm not super sick right now. The one thing that I do have that you've probably noticed, and that is why I can't stop looking at myself in the viewfinder, is I've burst a blood vessel in my eye. I sent a picture of it to my boyfriend's mum. She's a nurse and she's like, it's just a burst blood vessel. It's like a bruise on your eye, probably from coughing. There's nothing really to be worried about. It will heal. If it's not touching my iris, and if it's gone after 2 weeks, then there's nothing to worry about. But I can't stop looking at myself in the mirror. It's like really bad. Hang on, let me get you a bit closer so you can see it properly. Skip away if you don't want to see this. But I, as I have mentioned before, I'm fascinated with stuff like this. So yeah, this is the first video back that you're going to see. So if you've watched this all the way, hello, I have COVID. So that is why this video is a week late. That is why Vlogmas got cut short for a minute there. I did mention on my community channel about my laptop breaking, so you might already have heard about that, but I haven't mentioned, except I have mentioned on my Instagram that I have COVID. So if you follow me there, you will know that I have COVID. Otherwise, you might not have been aware. But yeah. But I did finish these 3 books, the ones that I haven't wrapped up yet, and I finished all of the books from the Goodreads Choice Awards, and I have thoughts and feelings and opinions to talk to you about. So I should probably do that. The Hour of the Witch by Bohjalian. Now, I actually really enjoyed this. I wasn't expecting to. Very much a more plotty book than I'm used to. And then I read the reviews and everyone's like, it's really slow, not a lot happens. And I was like, oh, this felt super plotty for me, but I suppose for other people maybe it's a bit slow. But I enjoyed it. It's about this woman who is trying to get divorced from her husband, and she's in Boston when it's like a Puritan colony, which is legal there. You can get divorced, but it's very hard to do because obviously everyone's a man. So unless you've been abandoned or adultery has been proven, then it's very hard to get divorced. But anyway, she wants to, and so she's trying to get divorced from this man who is abusive to her. And then there are all these rumours about her being a witch, which is not true, but someone's out to get her, basically. Eventually it ends up in a witch trial. And I did enjoy this. The writing is not my preference, generally speaking, but I thought it was good enough. I enjoyed some of the elements that it touched on, the way that it talked about what the Puritan culture was like at the time. I thought it did a good job of setting up the sense of time and place, which is one of the things that I've struggled with a lot of the books here, is the setting up of the time and place. I thought the characters, there were few of them, but I could understand their motivation and kind of understand them as characters, which again is missing in a lot of these books. And yeah, I really was surprised by this, because when I was talking to you about it at the beginning, I was like, I'm not sure that I like the way that he's using some of the older language, which he kind of seemed to drop it, and it just sort of stopped happening so much, or maybe I just got used to the way it was happening and I stopped noticing it as much. It's kind of a bit thrillery, and so it had that page-turning vibe. And after some of these more, I don't know how to describe them, they're the ones without the historical feeling and ones without much drawing me through the plot, having a book that I actually was interested in what the outcome would be, I enjoyed. I thought that the ending was a little easy. It didn't quite feel earned, which I prefer, but yeah, I actually quite like this book. Right, then I also finished The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. I enjoyed this one as well, actually. I thought this one was the one that was the most well written in terms of my preference for style. It wasn't perfect for what I like. It felt, I think, as I said when I was talking about it in the beginning, it felt YA a little, but like well done, charming YA. I read a review that said it was basically just a retelling of East of Eden, and I haven't read East of Eden, so I can't comment on that. But it did very much feel like Americana, 1950s. It was a look at class, I thought, which was quite interesting, the way that it talked about class in the 1950s in America, the sort of the reality of the American dream. I thought was quite well done, and it did, as I said earlier, it hadn't really touched on race and like segregation, and that did sort of get touched on, but it was very lightly done, and that wasn't what the book was talking about, but it's also like seems weird, you can't really avoid it, and it felt like it was a little bit avoided. But in terms of the plot, again, I was interested in what was going on. It didn't go the way that you expected it to go. It went off the rails of what the premise set it up to do. Like, it still was a road trip story, but it wasn't where you expected it to go. And I appreciated that. Like, it wasn't like super twisty, but it was like, think about the way that your life can go off the rails and away from what you expected. And that was reflected in the plot of the book. So I enjoyed that. It definitely felt like it was trying to make me cry at the end, and it didn't. But I could see the ways the characters got to the places that they got to, their motivation, and again, I thought they were quite well developed, and that was quite well done. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a solid, well done book, and definitely for the type of person who wants to read that sort of book, it was done in a way that worked. The Four Winds by Kristen Hannah, I also finished, and I don't know if I've talked to you about this one at all. It's been a few days since I've talked to you about any of these books, so I've forgotten what I've actually talked about. But this one is set during the Depression and the Dust Bowl era, and it is about a family in Texas. They end up together, this man and this woman end up together and having a family, and then because of the Dust Bowl, they can't stay in Texas anymore, and it just goes through the 20s and 30s in America for agricultural families and what that was like. This book, like, it's a rip-roaring pace. Everything happens all of a sudden. None of the characters' motivations seem to have any motivations. They also don't seem to grow or change at all as characters. They just are the same person the whole time. There's no character developed. Like, the characters are developed. Like, you can see this is their personality. I can very clearly see a character summary for all of them, but they don't change at all, even though this covers like decades. Nothing about them evolves in any way. It's the writing style is very like over dramatic, maudlin, kind of like a Nicholas Sparks film, I think, dealing like, you know, Nicholas Sparks is very southern and deals with rich people's problems in the South in America, with occasionally one of the two people in the couple is from a working class background. This is only about working class people, so there's no rich people. A lot of this is about money troubles. They look at the labour movement in California in the 1920s. I thought was very interesting. 1930s. I thought that was an interesting thing to add, and I thought that some of the historical context was interesting. And this one, unlike some of the others, did very much feel like it was set in that time period, and the time period felt fully realised, and the characters felt like they were people of that time. But yeah, the things they did, the relationships between them and their motivations just fell really flat. Also, for a book about the American Depression, this is a very white book. I can't say I'm an expert on the American Depression at all, but pretty sure black people were a part of the Depression and experienced some terrible things at the time, and there's no black people in this book at all. Mexican people are mentioned as having been deported, but that's it. It's like, so no Latinx people, Latina people were left at all. Yeah, it's only white people, and it's not like nothing bad happened to white people in the Depression. Of course, this book is kind of about class war, so what happened to poor people is very much part of it, but it just confused me as to why there is only white people in this book. I was like, surely you can mention the fact that this was all even worse for black people. But no, black people don't exist in the concept of this book. There you have it. I've read 10 books. I've read all of the Goodreads Choice Awards. So I made graphics. So let's have a look. So I was thinking about what I thought that the way these votes work. So the Goodreads Choice Award, of course, is a popularity contest. It's only people who vote, so it's people who vote. It's a general public voted for award, which means the most people who've read it and the people who have rated it the most highly, those are the ones you expect to win. So by number of ratings, we have The Four Winds, which has 301.6 thousand ratings. Then Malibu Rising, 247.5. Then The Lost Apothecary, 132.8. The Hour of the Witch with 21, and Yellow Wife with 16.9. That's it by rating, by number of ratings. But if we also look at what the average rating is, that changes things. So then you've got the Rose Code at the top with 4.47, then the Yellow Wife with 4.36, then the Lincoln Highway with 4.34, the Hour of the Witch 3.88, and the Lost Apothecary with 3.78. So pretty much all of these have very high ratings, very high average ratings. There are none of these that I would give above a 4, but that's my personal taste. Anyway, so then I kind of decided to try and put those together to like predict what it would be based on a combination of where they rank in terms of how many people have read them and where they rank in terms of the high rating. So I thought it would be The Four Winds. That has the most number of shelvings, and it is also the fourth highest in terms of average rating. Then The Rose Code, because that one's right up the top with high rating. Then Malibu Rising, been very popular. Then the Lincoln Highway, the Paris Library, the Yellow Wife, the Lost Apothecary, the Dictionary of Lost Words, the Personal Librarian, and then the Hour of the Witch, because very few people have read the Hour of the Witch, and it has one of the lowest ratings as well. What it actually ended up being was Malibu Rising ended up winning this, and I think my personal opinion on why Malibu Rising won, even though The Four Winds had nearly 100,000 more shelves, is that people who have voted in the Goodreads Choice Awards who don't read a lot of historical fiction have read Malibu Rising. Because Taylor Jenkins Reid is incredibly popular, because this is barely a historical fiction book, it is one that a lot of people have read, and so a lot of people, it will have been the only one they read at the shortlist, and they voted for that. That is the problem with these awards, is that people aren't choosing their favourite, they're just choosing the one that they read. But I don't think there's really any way to get around that. So the actual ranking is Malibu Rising, then The Four Winds, then The Lost Apothecary, then The Rose Code, then the Lincoln Highway, Paris Library, the Dictionary of Lost Words, the Hour of the Witch, the Personal Librarian, and the Yellow Wife. Yellow Wife ended up right at the bottom, which again, it has the fewest shelvings, so that's not that surprising, even though it does have a really high rating for the people who have read it, have in general really enjoyed it, but it's got so many fewer ratings than any of the others. Like, it's got, I think, 1/5 of the ratings of The Four Winds, so yeah, it's very, very low down. But the reason we are here is to talk about what I liked. So my favourite, the one I'm going to put at the top, and I did make a graphic, but I have since changed my mind. So I am going to say the one that I enjoyed the most was The Hour of the Witch by Chris Bohjalian. Very much surprised me. Not been published in the UK. Was not one that I was expecting to enjoy at all. But yeah, I really enjoyed this one, and it's one that I've thought about since. It's the one that I had the most enjoyable reading experience of. None of these books blew my mind. None of these books were excellent, like my style of writing. I said none of them would get over a 4, but that was my favourite out of all of them, the one that I had the best time reading. Then I would say the Dictionary of Lost Words, which I would probably have said was the most me book. It's the only one that was on my like anticipated releases, but then when it came out I thought it might be a bit Stacey Hall's. It was better than Stacey Hall's, but still, like I said, but in my review, felt more like a period drama than something set in an actual historical time period. Then I would say the Lincoln Highway. In terms of writing, that one's up there at the top, the most charming and the most well-developed characters, but a little meandering, a little forgettable as well. It hasn't stuck with me as much as The Hour of the Witch. Then we'd have the Rose Code, which was just good fun Sunday afternoon kind of book, and good quality for that. I mean, that's kind of what I expect from a lot of these books, because I think that kind of casual escapism is what a lot of people read for, and so that's what a lot of the popular books have, is that kind of casual escapism, plot driven, something intriguing to keep you turning the pages. That's a very popular thing, and it's not my style, but for me this one had well developed enough characters, good enough setting in the time periods, and yeah, I enjoyed it. But I think The Four Winds I would put next, because even though I didn't love the writing style, like I said, that look at working class America, that exploration of the labour movement, it felt very centred in that time period and in the place of Texas and California. I very much felt like it was of that time period, and I enjoyed that. Could have had better characters, could have had better writing, but for the historical nature of it, I enjoyed it. Then Malibu Rising, below that. Yes, it's historical fiction. Like, I'm not going to say it's not historical fiction, like, of Women and Salt. It is set in a time period that is a lot earlier than it was written, but it doesn't feel like historical fiction. Like, the 1980s part could have been today, apart from the name she was dropping and the way she was describing outfits. Like, there was nothing that needed it to be in the 80s. It could have been in the 2020s, apart from the fact maybe having mobile phones and the internet to connect with people would have been, like, ruin some of the plot points. But then you just need a stronger plot. But yeah, again, very soapy, and well written enough to be compelling, but not with any actual style. Then Yellow Wife. Like I said when I was reading this, it needed a lot more space. There was very little description. It felt quite bare bones. The time period, in some aspects, I could feel it of the time period, but a lot of the time it didn't feel very true to it. It felt like rickety, like a rickety stage. Like, I could see the set, and it didn't feel like a well-produced period drama. It felt like a Amdram production of a period drama. Then we have The Lost Apothecary, which just annoyed me. Librarian, which is very two-dimensional characters, very the personal librarian, because she talked like it was 2021. She didn't talk, well, no, actually, she talked like it was 1997. And she just didn't have any character. She was just like this perfect character who was so good at everything, and there was absolutely no chance that anything perilous was going to happen. That is my ranking of these. You know, I never find my favourite books in this video. I've only done it twice so far, but I do have a good time reading it, but I do have a good time making it, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'm sorry I am not at my most coherent because of the COVID situation, but please do let me know in the comments if you've stuck around this long. What was your, have you read any of these? What did you think of them? Do you enjoy me doing this historical fiction Goodreads choice video? And I will see you again soon with another Vlogmas video, because Vlogmas is restarting. Hopefully there will be a video every other day until January. So I will see you again very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.